Good on you. Okay. So welcome everyone. Welcome to everyone here face to face. Welcome to all of you in the digital domain, especially those on Facebook Live right now. My name is Julian Lee and I'm the Sustainability Educator here. And you've got Steve Batley. No, that's great. It's muted there, but not on there. Oh. Yeah. Steve Batley is our landscape architect, permaculture expert, and regen champion. And is it ladybird, aphid lover?
Aphid lover.
Aphid lover. You'll have to stick around to find out why he likes aphids.
He eats them.
Probably.
We are here at the Randwick Sustainability Hub inside the outdoor classroom, and we are meeting on Gadigal and Bidjigal land. So I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to those past, present, and emerging. This format, as I was explaining, but now we're not on mute, it's a mixed audience. It goes for 10 weeks. The first hour is with you guys out in Zoom and also with you face to face. And in the second hour, and there are a couple of spots available still face to face, we go for an extra hour, and that's where we can delve even further. You can ask all those questions that you've been saving up, and we often do something practical. If it's garden orange, we go out there. But in this workshop series, we're going to be really focusing on doing. So let's learn something about your sustainable home, and let's do it. And let's do it right here and now. So I hope you're ready to get going. I think especially in the second hour, we're going to get cracking. Okay, so there's topics that are coming up, jam-packed. Today is climate change. Is it real? I thought, given let's just go through some of the information really quickly, and I think it's helpful to help perhaps when you're talking to other people, because we might all think it's legit and be concerned about it. I'm presuming that's why you're here, but talking to other people, it's not always the same. So having some information up your sleeve, in a relatively simple, coherent story, that's what I'm hoping to give to you today. Straight after that, next week, we'll be talking about consumer power. I think it's like $666 billion per year we as Australians spend on stuff. So that's a lot of power that we have with how we spend money. So we're going to look into how we might be able to leverage each of our wallets to do good in the world. Then I've got my colleague, we've got some guest speakers coming too. We've got Sam Kelly, who is my colleague, and he knows everything about energy. It's incredible. So if you're interested in solar power, green power, all that sort of thing, there's some really cool stuff, really cool simple stuff that I've learned from Sam that has made a huge difference. I'm now sitting on under 5 kilowatt hours per day, and anyway, so cheap as. Steve will then be on for food production and native habitat. We'll be going into water and cleaning. Then we're going to get another expert to fill us in on transport and all the cool things that are going on in cars and bikes and car sharing. Then the last 3 sessions, I'm really glad because all of you guys are here for the 10 weeks. The Zoom people might be coming in and out, but hopefully we'll get to know some. Oh, hey Kim, welcome. Come on, turn your video on so we can see you. Kim has fantastic headphones. Hey, she's even got them on. Hey, Kim, welcome. Hey, Lisa. Cool. The last 3 is really going to focus a little bit more on, great, we know all this stuff. We might be doing all these things, but then, okay, how do we communicate that, and how do we work with other people to inspire them as well? So we're going to be looking at some of the stuff around that too. So, what do you reckon?
Sounds good. I'm assuming you can hear us, Kim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kim, can you can hear us? Yeah, cool. Okay, fantastic. She's up. Yeah, audio check. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay. The format's going to be somewhat the same. While I'm doing, normally Steve's the speaker and I'm the one doing all this. You'll find out that we probably both have a relatively informal style. We like you to ask questions. If you're out on Zoom, we actually prefer you to ask the questions because we can hear you, as in you guys can hear the people on Zoom, and vice versa. If you're here in the room, speak loudly so that the people on Zoom can hear you as well. Yeah, so let's give it a go. So the first thing that I'm sort of want to mention around climate change is that, so I'm going to be starting from climate change believer perspective. But one of the things that's really tricky around climate change is that we're dealing with huge numbers often, either minuscule numbers or huge numbers. And as humans, we're actually not very good at dealing with that. You know, we can't encompass some of this. So I'm going to do some stuff that I've sort of concocted that might be, I'm hoping is a little bit fun, but also help us get our heads around why it's so difficult to talk and comprehend some of this stuff that's going on around climate change. So I'm going to start with this number line. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a billion years. Now, I've also drawn a number up here. This is 1 quintillion, which we'll get to later. I had to Google all this to know where quintillion fitted in, but it actually all makes sense. You know, billion, B for million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion. You know, a billion. So the age of the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. We're talking about numbers with like at least 9 zeros after it. So a billion years later, they reckon, life started. So it's taken a long time for all the conditions to eventually get together enough for life to occur. And I think this is important given what we'll start to talk about, some of the time frames we're talking about these days in terms of impact. It's taken a while to get to where we are now. Now, life started, it's pretty simple life. So now we've got to go, this is where it's really difficult for me. This is 0.6 or 600 million years ago. 600 million years ago, we've got animals. So it took, what, practically 3 billion years before life got complicated enough to have animals. 200,000 years ago, modern humans arrived on the scene. Now on this scale, that's here. And my pen's not thin enough and your eyes aren't good enough to see that difference. So what I'm going to have to do is this. So this is 0 and this is 1 million years ago. 1 million years ago. So 200,000 years ago, unfortunately, is still here. Does that make sense to everyone? I've sort of expanded the scale. Okay. And I'm sure this is not the first time most of you have seen something like this before, but I will refer to it. Okay, modern humans. Industrial agriculture happened here at 80 years. So I'm going to expand this out massively again and go 1,000 years. So it's not quite Egyptian times 1,000 years ago, is it? No. Anyway, what happened 1,000 years ago? Does anybody know? Kim, are you studying that at school? What happened 1,000 years ago? Anybody know?
Don't know. 1,000 years. Okay.
Oh, I guess it's 1,080, wasn't it? Because we're up to 2,000.
The Roman Empire.
Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire was gone by then. There wasn't, I don't think there was a lot happening at that point.
But there were civilizations going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a momentous time. It's probably
Everyone was just chilling out.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So remember, okay, 4.5 billion years ago, let's expand it out again. 80 years ago was industrial agriculture. Guess what also happened 80 years ago?
Climate change.
Climate change. You got it, Kim. Hi, Edith. Welcome. We'd love you to turn your video on if you're up for it, because, oops, and I'll stay in the screen. We'd love you to turn your video on because all of us here can then see your face too. And it makes you more present with us, but it's not compulsory. Okay, climate change. So carbon levels started going up 80 years ago, basically at the same time. So if you imagine industrial agriculture, human beings arrived on the scene here, and industrial agriculture, can't show you the difference, arrived here, and climate change started happening here. Now,
It's 1940.
So basically, what we're saying by climate change caused by humans is carbon levels greater than 400 parts per million. And I'll show you a graph that shows the context and what climate deniers are saying in a second. We can't even remember 1,000 years ago, right? What was happening? And I'm sure we've all done history at some point in our lives, and we can't remember what was going on. And no, fair enough, plenty of busy lives. But, take in mind this, it's no wonder we can't comprehend these scales. Big numbers, small numbers, we don't do it very well. And you would have seen with coronavirus, with the cases, they're using logarithmic scales. And it tries to compress it so that it looks in a format that we can understand. But, if you haven't done logarithms, then it might seem confusing too. It might actually be misleading. But basically, with the US having, crazy numbers and us having a few, it was the only way to put the things on the same page. Similarly, we had to do this to try and put some of these things on the same board. Okay. The other thing that makes climate change really tricky to deal with is rates of change. So really slow rates of change. This took a really long time, 1 billion years, but also really fast rates of change. So if we're in a car, we're driving along, our car does about 500 kilometres for a fuel tank. When you get to halfway, when the tank reaches halfway, you've probably done about 250 kilometres. And you probably start to think, I should find a petrol station sometime soonish, right? But you don't have to worry too much because you've got half a tank to go. You have another 250 k's, no problems. But that's not really what happens when we're talking about coronavirus and climate change, and in this case, Froggy's world. This is my analogy to try and show what happens here in basically exponential growth. So Froggy's world's 1 million times bigger than this number, the age of the Earth. It can fit 1 quintillion froggies on it. So that's a 1 with 18 zeros after it. It's 1 million times bigger than a billion.
What do you mean by Froggy's world?
Froggy's world, this is an imaginary world. It's populated by 2 froggies. And every minute these froggies double in population. So, so 11 o'clock at night, these 2 froggies on Froggy World that can fit some number that's massively bigger. Like there's 8 billion people on the planet, right? So Froggy's World fits 1 quintillion froggies on it. Froggies are a bit smaller. So there's 1 million times more capacity on Froggy World. So at 11 o'clock, the 2 froggies, they go out, they're looking at the beautiful ocean view, and a minute later there's 4 froggies. So on Froggy's World, froggies repopulate every minute, right? So at 10 past 11, there's 1,000 frogs on Froggy Worlds. No sweat, thousands back here. Okay, so it's still time. 10 minutes later, 1,000 froggies. Okay, another 10 minutes on, there's actually 1 million frogs. And the frogs are now starting to have arguments with themselves. They're running out of space, and some are saying there's no problem, there'll be a technological solution. Some are saying, we got tons of time. Like, really, what's the problem? We've got 1 million of us, and a quintillion of us can actually live on this planet. No sweat. Don't worry about it. Okay. So think about fuel tank halfway, it actually is no sweat. So my question to you is, at what point is Froggy's world half full or half empty? Have they still got half the planet to populate?
Yeah. Now.
Next
So-
day.
So in this model, 1 quintillion is 60 minutes worth of Froggy repopulation. So at what time, if midnight, so 12 p.m, started with 2 at 11 p.m, at what time is Froggy's world still got half of the entire planet to fill? Yeah. 11:59. You go backwards. Go backwards 1 minute because they're doubling every minute. So they're halving every minute. Go backwards. So at a car, plenty of time. In logarithmic or exponential growth, it's a minuscule amount of time. It's too late. By the time the planet is half full, you've only got a minute left before it's full. It's only 2 minutes while there's 3/4 of the planet. And that's why, say with the coronavirus stuff, countries like Australia and, other countries where they've kept it down, it's actually relatively easy to control. But as soon as it escapes, it really escapes because it just accelerates. So that's a rate of change thing. Massive numbers and fast rates of change, like until you've done that before, like it doesn't make sense, does it? That it's only 1 minute before that it's half full. Anyway, so I'm hoping that was a interesting analogy to think about. And do you mind just screen sharing? We're going to go into some of the carbon graphs now. Yeah. Cool. So, climate deniers, so that's just sort of some of the context. The climate deniers are saying, what's the big deal? There's been variations in carbon level, and as you can see on the graph, hundreds of thousands of years. Carbon's been going up, carbon's been going down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And here on the screen, you can see for 800,000 years. So that actually fits on the first scale here. 800,000, oh, sorry, no it doesn't. It fits here. 800,000 years. Oh, more crumbs. Oh. Maybe if you can just go back to the exe file and I'll draw it up for the third ones. So basically the graph was like this. When they first did these graphs, which was only a few years ago, you can see now that the graph does that. So that, in my mind, one of the ways to answer that sort of thing, well, there's always been climate change, is that for the last 800,000 years, we've kept it fairly stable. The planet's kept it fairly stable. And it's only in the last 80 years that it's gone past this stability. And in fact, the last 80 years, but in the last few years, it's gone above 400 parts per million. And that's the first time it's gone above 400 parts per million.
That's how many years?
This is about 350 in 800,000 years. Right? This is the first time. This is 800,000 years ago. This is today.
And when did it go over 400?
Oh, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Sometime in the last 10 years. So that's a difference. You can't say. I would find it hard to stick to the idea that this is not human induced, when for the last 800,000 years it's actually stayed within a very stable range, and that's actually been really important for a whole lot of things to develop, and including human civilization, where things were fairly predictable. But then I was interested to know, well, why does this graph end at 800,000? Yeah, here we go. 2016, it went over 400. And, you know, oh, there we go, 300 down to 200. So I was interested to know, well, what happened before 800,000? Why did the graph stop at 800,000? So if you can switch over to the next one, just to back over. Okay, so this graph is using a logarithmic scale. And here, see the flat line? And before we saw it was going up and down between 300 and 200 parts per million. This flat line is actually that line there. And then it jumps up. Now, if we go back here, the scale here is showing thousands of years. Just for people on Zoom. So this second section here is in thousands of years, but then right back here it starts to go over to millions of years. So we're really talking about, you know, we're doing a good comparison there. If you go back millions of years, you can see that actually the carbon levels got way above 400 and are up in the 500, 1,000 and even 2,000 parts per million. So, you know, if you were a denier, you might be able to say, what's the big deal? Because way back then, there was plenty of life on the planet. The planet was full of life.
But not animals, just like one-celled.
No, animals were 600, and right there is 400.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So this is all during animals. So
Yeah.
complex life, roaming the planet, probably dinosaurs. No problems. Way up there at 2,000. So what's the big deal with 400? The big deal in my mind is that back then, when the carbon was that high, not only was the planet way hotter, but the sea level was meters higher. Where do we build all our cities? Down at sea level. So I'm just trying to get here at a financial, human-centric reason why this might be a big deal. You know, if we had to move our cities, like we're not going to be able to move our cities. So going up, if this trajectory continues, which is all the predictions, we're going to have to move our cities because the sea levels will rise. That's a pretty big problem. Now going back to the rest of the planet, also these rates have changed there. That scale is on millions of years. This is just like a few years. You know, the rate of change is enormous, which means the ability for all the living things to adapt and move and evolve in that time is, the rate of change is too high. So I guess that's some information to sort of say that, look, climate change in my mind is real. The graphs show that, to me, it points towards it being human. It's not just natural what's going on at the moment, both the amount and the scale. And we need to do something about it. So all the rest of this workshop series is about what are we going to do about it. So it's going to be, you know, there's lots of really impactful things we can do. So I'm super hopeful, and so it's not going to be a end of world is nigh. So what to do? To me, we've got limited time, we've got limited money, we've got other stuff to do. It makes sense, Steve, if we can go to the website Drawdown. So there's Paul Hawkins. Has anyone come across Paul Hawkins? Anyway, drawdown.org. He got together 80, probably more now, international climate change scientists to investigate what were the most impactful things that people could do for positive climate change action. Drawdown.org. So that you didn't have to guess. And what's, yeah, cool, that'll be fine. So just scroll to the top for a second, Steve, so that everyone can just see what drawdown, you know, so you know you've arrived, sort of thing. So here's what the project drawdown, that's the sort of logo. So you know you've got there if you've got that. Table of solutions, and then thanks, Steve. Go back down. What they did was they created a table. The different scenarios are based on a 1.5 degree and a 2 degree scenario. We're just going to look at one of them for the moment. For each of these solutions, it goes back to research papers. There's both a plain English version of why these things are important, but each of them is backed up with the scientific research too. So I think it's compelling site to go to. What I love is that you can just go down the list. I would start at the top, obviously. If you're going to try and do something in the climate change world, to me, how do you prioritise? Well, great, here's a table, science-backed, and you could start at the top of things that you might be interested in trying to do. So for me, Steve and I are both in food, we both love regen ag, so it's pretty exciting to see a food-related one at the very top. Now, people might wonder, how could reducing food waste be at the top? And one of the reasons is because farmers are the single biggest land users on the planet. So anything to do with food has a massive impact on the planet. And also food has a sort of multiplier effect. So if we move over to regenerative practices in farming, for every 1% of carbon that we increase in the soil, the amount of water, the amount of nutrition, the benefits multiply out everywhere. Reduce food waste. There's a difference between food waste avoidance and food waste diversion. Diversion is composting. Diversion is not having your apple core or your food go to landfill. So if you've got leftovers from lunch and you put it in the compost instead of the landfill, that's great. But what you'll notice, and everything on this chart is important, but obviously if you're going to try and do something, then the things towards the bottom are the ones that are going to have more of an impact. Towards the bottom of this list is composting. It does something for climate change. But the stuff up here, food waste, is about avoidance. What that means is eat the entire sandwich, create leftovers, things like that. So don't allow the food to not be eaten at all, has over 10 times the impact of composting. Composting has an impact, but avoiding the waste in the first place. It also means things like the imperfects. Half of all food grown on the planet never leaves the farm, particularly in developed, Western countries where things like imperfects, Woolworths and Coles, for example, won't buy them. Perfectly good food, they just keep wanting. So that's why, some of this stuff is a big deal. Notice health and education is actually second on this list. That's around population growth. So any single one of us can obviously reduce the amount of food going to waste. The other thing we can do is when it's our birthday, no thanks for the presents, we can say, actually, love it if you donate it to Kiva or something that focuses on education for girls. That's the second most impactful thing you can do for climate change. And any single one of us can do it. Then look at that, third one, straight back to food again. So, and what I've noticed in doing this is that we're not talking about regen production that uses regen ag, but in industrial ag, cows are the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in the modern farming system. So simply, if you don't want to go vegetarian, because plant-rich diets, they've said that deliberately. It's not saying you have to go veg, but one of the things I've done is actually I've just stopped, I just replaced beef wherever possible with any other type of animal. Because beef using industrial agriculture is disproportionately high carbon emitter. Same goes for milk. So I just cut my milk with a little bit of almond milk. So yeah, look, go to this website, check it out. If you're, want to take action, I'd recommend you use this as a way, as a guide, and go, which is the highest up the list that fits in with your passions and choose to do something there. And there's plenty of information sitting behind each of those words on the website. Okay. So that's a lot of information all in one go. The other thing that we'll be doing in bits of this workshop is a chance for you guys to get together and think and listen together. So it's a way of helping to absorb and digest and make this information yours so that when you leave here today, more of it stays with you and you're more able to use it in talking to other people. So sometimes in some of these, what we're going to be doing is what we could call a think and listen. So we're going to take 10 minutes in probably groups of 3. Is Kim still here? Yep, cool. Okay, so that's perfect. 3, 3, and no, we might do 3, 2, and 2. And out there we'll do 3. We've got 10 minutes. What you're going to do is divide that up evenly in your groups. You're going to take equal times to listen to each other. So each person gets 3 minutes each. In your case, it'll be closer to 4.5, 5 minutes each to talk and think. The other people are not, it's not a conversation. They're there to be friendly, engaged listeners. And your chance to talk out loud and process what's been said or disagree with it vehemently or whatever you need to do around what you've just heard there. So don't interrupt, just listen warmly. Don't worry if there's silent bits. Sometimes, like, again, don't interrupt. So if there's some silence, don't fill it. Sit with the discomfort. Let the person have their space to think, because that's where new thoughts might come up. And in each group, could somebody decide to report back what happened in your group at the end? Any questions before we do that? No? So what I'll do, you guys out on Zoom, we'll put you into a breakout room. Or actually, we'll put you into a breakout room. And if there isn't a clock up in the top right-hand corner of the room, could one of you please just, use your phone or watch just to keep check? I'd suggest 3 minutes each for you guys. And just decide who's going to go 1, 2, or 3 and who's going to report back. Okay. How do you guys want to split up? Do you just want to do 3, 2, and 2, or? Okay. Yeah, put that aside. Oh,
Hello, I can't hear anything.
That's because no one's.
Oh, okay. Okay. How do I get in there?
So we talked about recycling and
Avoiding food waste, eating things, and she's buying, she's a conscious shopper, but she does feel overwhelmed, like with all this information and kind of how to actually be effective, I guess. And yeah, wanting to learn more. Lucia is doing quite a bit and wants to renovate her home, make it more sustainable. Feeling a bit of frustration when, like when you're with friends who aren't as conscious, and kind of how to approach them. One, and how to guide her children as well, and being conscious. Yeah, I guess that's the key. And I guess I've been aware for a very long time, since I was a teenager, which is a long time ago, in the 70s. So I'm kind of a lot of frustration with, or just, it's hard for me. I think environment all the time. So it's really frustrating and hard for me when I see so many unconscious people around, and but I find it hard sometimes to find my voice and speak up, because I know I don't want to come from a place of frustration. I want to come from like Julian, who's got, and Steve, like that way of communicating. I guess I'm doing, yeah. So partly I guess I want to get more ideas for how to communicate about climate change and about what people can do to get inspiration in that.
Okay. Thanks for doing that for the group, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's the speaker over here?
So, Susan and I talked about how in the last 80 years, climate change has accelerated so quickly, and industrial and economic growth has become our focus. And it would really take a drastic event to change this, and to a degree, I suppose COVID has been an example of that. But we would need a drastic event that focuses people's attention on climate change to get them to make more ongoing changes rather than react in the short term as we have with COVID. And then getting into health and education and population growth, we got into the idea that ideally each family should not have more than 2 children. And then there's the question of whether some families can have 3 if others have 0 and whatever. And so then, let's see, encouraging people to eat their whole meal. When you go out in public, you often see people not eat the whole thing that they've ordered, whatever it is, and that they leave a substantial amount on the plate. then the idea that here that there's an element of preaching to the converted, and there's the question of how do we reach a larger audience, and then the idea that we should stop wasting rather than just producing more and more, and that we should use things up rather than throwing them out prematurely, and that we should, with home renovations, think of the environmental impact, and whether the renovation is necessary, whether it's going to be an improvement from an environmental perspective or not. And yeah, that was everything.
Right, thank you. He's the lucky one here. And you don't have to speak to the camera, like you can speak to all of us.
We had an interesting discussion. It was just in 10 minutes, I think we just covered like a lot of parallels, and it almost felt incomplete, the discussion, but it was just like a beginning of a lot of questions. Yeah, so I think overall with all of the information, there was like a few emotions, like one was overwhelmed, and also a sense of urgency to take action, and I think also a sense of hope, like knowing what's currently, like what Steve shared in our tape about regenerative agriculture, the kind of impact it has, and yeah, that like offered as like a sense of hope, and yeah, just like very like questions around like being frustrated about with people not understanding what climate change is and the impact it could possibly have on all of us. And like for me, what I shared with just what I processed was surprisingly with just all of normally my immediate reaction to all this information is to feel like the world is coming to an end, and but I somehow felt very excited to like just see the science behind it, and to know, and looking at the website to know that there's like so much of research done on solutions, and it's just like it's all there, and you just have to act and get it done. I think that's kind of outlook that I have, and missing out a lot. Do you want to add anything?
I think a lot of the probably what we discussed was also echoed in other
Yeah,
sentiments.
yeah.
You know, about how do we share this information with others in a way that is not sort of preaching. So for me, it's about, yes, I want to sort of make more changes in my own life, but how do I communicate?
Yeah.
To my friends and to people around me.
Great.
So,
Okay. And Kim, you were the nominated person to report back from your group?
We talked about recycling, about that it's important to get green energy, electricity and energy out of stuff, and try to make sure that the plants there's enough plants there, and planting more plants, not burning as much fossil fuels if possible, and making it completely zero CO2 using, and trying to find a way to make plants take in more CO2, so you can take up all the vacuum and all the extra. And it's important that the forests are healthy, because if they're not healthy, they can give out CO2 when they rot or die. So that's very important. So.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, sometimes with some connections I can't turn the volume on because it just crackles. Sorry. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. That was really good to hear from everyone. So yeah, this series will be giving hopefully what's digestible information. We used to, we'll be giving hopefully what's really digestible information, especially the future ones, because the topic will be much more concrete, with solutions, so we can be hopeful, concrete actions, things we can actually do. And we're going to be designing so that we actually, before you leave today, actually do something. So I'm excited about that. And also, especially the last three, we're going to be looking particularly about how do we take it beyond ourselves. How do we do that in a way that doesn't annoy other people, or where we're feeling sort of tense about it all. So what I want to do right now, before we go, especially for Kim and Elizabeth, is just quickly talk about the role of auditing. Yeah, thank you. So if you're in the Randwick area, which you probably are, but it might be in other areas too, Randwick Council is partnered with Climate Clever so we've basically partnered, which means that any subscription through them is half price automatically. The reason I mention it is because it's really helpful to know where you personally are. So they have created an app. Oh yeah,
Sorry, doing that.
no problems. So Climate Clever, that's what it looks like. Ah, but it's not a screen share. Yep, there we go. That one. Climate Clever, home subscription is $30. After the council discount, it's only $15 for the whole year. You guys as face-to-face ones, we're giving you one. And we're hoping that you'll actually use it while you're here. And let's see, let's give it a test run. You'll be the first people in the Randwick area to use it. For anybody else watching this video down the track, please go to Climate Clever. They've made it really easy to audit your house, to measure where your energy and water, and it means every time you put it, depending on which supply you're with, it actually just sucks it in itself, or you add it in. But you'll be able to see, it recommends actions, and then you'll be able to see over time whether your bills are going up or down. And, you might be able to think back, well, that's when I did that action, and tie it back to actually having done something. So at $15 or even $30, you're pretty much guaranteed of making more than your money back if you do even just one of the actions that's suggested by the app. I've been speaking with them, it's pretty new, but they're developing it all the time, so it's getting better and better. And it was actually featured in the TV show Planet A with Craig Newcastle. And as you can see, there's a school version and a business version. And I'm working with some of the schools in the area for them to do it as a school-wide program where the students go around and actually audit their entire school, go through and suggest changes and make changes in their school, which at the end of the year they can report back to everyone. Yeah, so Steph, if you don't mind just sort of scrolling down a bit so you can just see quickly a little bit about what else is there. But while that's happening, yeah, so Elizabeth, Kim, it'd be awesome if you wanted to join in with that, join in. You can see, they've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. And so this is probably the time where we say goodbye to you and Kim. Sorry, Elizabeth and Kim. And we'll get all of you to just wave. Whoops, I'll stop the screen share, thanks. Sorry. There. So we're all saying goodbye to you guys, and we look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Yep, we'll see. And next week's topic, consumer power and what we can do using our wallet. Okay. See you, Kim. See you, Elizabeth.
See you, Elizabeth.
If you can just press stop over there.
And